The great hall of the Valorian palace was filled with light. Thousands of floating crystals hung from the ceiling, each one glowing with soft blue fire. The walls were made of living stone that breathed slowly, changing color with the mood of the room. Today the walls were gray. They had been gray for many weeks now. Princess Yuna sat on her throne at the center of the hall. She wore a gown of silver cloth that flowed like water around her feet. Her skin was pale blue, almost white, and her hair was the color of starlight. She was beautiful in the way that ice is beautiful, perfect, and cold, and impossible to touch. Around her stood the greatest nobles of the Valorian Empire. They wore their finest robes and carried their ceremonial swords. Behind them stood ambassadors from 100 different worlds. News drones floated everywhere, recording everything, sending images to billions of viewers across the galaxy. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting, and everyone was laughing. Not out loud, of course, that would be rude. But Yuna could feel their laughter. She could feel everything they felt. That was her curse. Valorians were born with gifts of the mind. They could sense emotions. Some could move objects without touching them. A few could even see glimpses of the future. But Yuna's gift was stronger than anyone's had been in 1,000 years. She did not just sense emotions, she projected them. Anyone who came close to her felt whatever she was feeling, multiplied 100 times. When she was happy, people near her felt joy so strong it brought tears to their eyes. When she was sad, they wept without knowing why. And when she was afraid or angry, the pain could drive them to their knees. No one could touch her. No one could come close. She had lived her whole life alone, and now, at the age of 32, she was expected to find a husband. The Emperor, her father, had explained it to her many times. The Valorian people were dying. A genetic plague had spread through their males, making them unable to have children. Scientists had worked for decades to find a cure. They had failed. The only hope now was to find an alien species whose genetics could bond with Valorian blood and create a new generation. The princess was the key. Her bloodline was the purest, the strongest. If she could bond with a compatible mate, their children might save the entire empire. So the emperor had sent invitations to every corner of the galaxy. He had promised wealth, power, and alliance to any suitor who could win his daughter's hand. Princes and nobles had come from everywhere. The finest males of 100 species had traveled across the stars for the chance to marry the Valorian princess, and one by one, they had failed. Yuna watched as the latest suitor approached. He was tall and green-skinned, with 4 arms and eyes like black diamonds. His name was Lord Ven, and he was the crown prince of the Kelleran Dominion. His people were known for their mental discipline. They could control their emotions completely. They felt no fear, no pain, no doubt. Lord Ven walked toward the princess with perfect confidence. He had trained for this moment for years. He believed he was ready. He was not ready. Yuna tried to calm herself. She tried to feel nothing. But she was tired and afraid and lonely, and those feelings leaked out of her like light from a cracked lamp. As Lord Ven came within 10 steps of her throne, her emotions hit him like a wave. He stopped walking. His 4 hands began to shake. His black eyes went wide. He said. His voice was trembling. I feel... Step back, one of the Valorian guards said. Step back now, but Lord Ven did not step back. He was frozen in place. Tears were streaming down his green face. He was feeling everything Yuna felt, her loneliness, her shame, her desperate hope, her crushing fear of failure. A lifetime of hidden emotions poured into him in seconds. He screamed. 2 guards caught him as he fell. They carried him from the hall while his attendants rushed forward, crying out in their own language. The news drones recorded every moment. Yuna sat perfectly still. Her face showed nothing. But inside she was breaking. That was the 43rd suitor. 43 princes and nobles from across the galaxy. Some had fled, some had fainted. Some had been carried out weeping. A few had grown violent from the emotional overload and had to be restrained. Not one had made it close, enough to touch her hand. The emperor stood from his own throne. He was old now, his blue skin faded to gray, but his voice was still strong. We will take a recess, he announced. The trials will continue tomorrow. The nobles began to file out. The ambassadors whispered to each other. Yuna could feel their thoughts even without her gift. They thought she was broken, defective, a princess no one could marry. They thought the Valorian Empire was finished. Yuna remained on her throne as the hall emptied. She would not cry. She would not show weakness. But when the last person had left and the great doors had closed, she allowed herself one small moment of despair. She closed her eyes and let herself feel the truth. She was going to die alone. Her people were going to fade away into history. And there was nothing she could do about it. In the far corner of the hall, hidden in shadows, a single figure remained. He was not a noble or a prince. He was just a security officer from a minor species, assigned to watch over his planet's tiny diplomatic delegation. His name was Taiho. He was human. And he had seen everything. He had watched 43 powerful aliens fail. He had watched the princess sit there, hour after hour, while the galaxy mocked her. He had seen her face when she thought no one was, looking the tiny cracks in her mask, the pain she was hiding from everyone. Taiho did not know much about politics or alien genetics or galactic empires, but he knew what loneliness looked like. He knew what it meant to be the one everyone gave up on. He stepped out of the shadows and walked slowly across the empty hall. He stopped at the base of the throne and looked up at the princess. Yuna opened her eyes. She stared at him in surprise. No one had ever approached her without ceremony, without announcement, without a crowd of officials and guards. "Who are you?" she asked. "Nobody important," Taiho said. "But I wanted you to know something." "What?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Tomorrow I'm going to try." Then he turned and walked away, leaving the princess alone with a feeling she had not experienced in a very long time. Hope. The human delegation to the Valorian Empire was small. 4 people. That was all Earth could afford to send. There was Ambassador Park, a gray-haired woman who had spent 30 years learning alien languages and customs. There were 2 scientists, Dr. Minho and Dr. Jisu, who were there to study Valorian technology. And there was Taiho, the security officer, whose job was to keep the others safe. Humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 15 years ago. In galactic terms, they were babies. Their technology was primitive. Their military was weak. Their planet was small and unremarkable. Most alien species did not even know humans existed. The Valorians had invited them as a courtesy. Nothing more. Humans were observers at this summit, allowed to watch but not expected to participate. They had been given rooms in the far wing of the palace, away from the important guests that Taiho did not mind. He had never expected to leave Earth in his lifetime. Just being here on an alien world, surrounded by wonders he could not understand, was enough for him, but that had changed when he watched the trials. The morning after he spoke to the princess, Taiho found Ambassador Park in the delegation's common room. She was drinking tea and reading reports on her tablet. "Ambassador," Taiho said, "I need to speak with you." Park looked up. She had known Taiho for 3 years. He was quiet, reliable, and never caused problems. The look on his face now made her put down her tea. "What is it?" "I want to enter the trials," Taiho said. "I want to try to bond with the princess." Park stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed. It was not a mean laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had just heard something impossible. "Taiho," she said gently, "you can't be serious." "I am. The trials are for compatible species. Humans aren't on the list. We weren't even invited to participate." "Then we asked for permission." Park set down her tablet. "Listen to me carefully. 43 suitors have tried, princes, nobles, warriors from the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. They all failed. Many of them were hurt badly. One of them is still in the medical wing, unable to speak." "I know. The princess's gift is too strong. Her emotions cause physical pain. Alien neurologists have studied her. They say any species with a standard nervous system cannot survive close contact with her." "I know," Taiho said again. "Then why do you want to try?" Taiho was quiet for a moment. He thought about the princess sitting alone on her throne. He thought about the way the galaxy had laughed at her. He thought about the look in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. Because someone should, he said. Park studied him. She had seen many things in her long career. She had watched humans do incredible things when everyone said they would fail. That was what humans did. They tried anyway. The Emperor will refuse, she said. Maybe, but we should ask. Park sighed. She picked up her tablet and began typing. I'll make the request. But Taiho, if he says yes and you get hurt, that's on you. I won't be able to protect you. I understand. And if you die, Earth loses its only security officer in this sector. Taiho smiled slightly. Then I won't die. The request was sent that morning. By afternoon, the entire palace was talking about it. A human wanted to try. A human from that tiny blue planet no one had heard of wanted to court the Valorian princess. Most people laughed. Some were offended. A few were curious. The Emperor was all three. He summoned Ambassador Park and Taiho to his private chambers that evening. The room was simpler than Taiho had expected. There were no floating crystals here, no living walls. Just stone and wood and soft light. The Emperor sat in a plain chair. He looked tired. Ruling a dying empire for 50 years had worn him down. You are the human who wishes to try, he said, looking at Taiho. Yes, Your Majesty. Why? It was the same question Park had asked. Taiho gave a different answer. Because I watched your daughter sit there for 3 days while everyone treated her like a broken machine. She's not a machine. She's a person. And she deserves to be treated like one. The Emperor's expression did not change. But something shifted in his eyes. You know that you will probably fail, yes. You know that the pain could kill you? Or damage your mind beyond repair? Yes, and you still want to try? Yes, the Emperor was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Park. Your species is strange, Ambassador. You are weak, short-lived, and technologically primitive. By every measure, you should not have survived your first century among the stars. And yet here you are. Park bowed her head. We are stubborn, Your Majesty. It is our greatest strength and our greatest flaw. The Emperor almost smiled, almost. Very well. The human may try. Tomorrow, at the morning session, he will be given a chance. Taiho bowed. Thank you, Your Majesty. Do not thank me yet? I have watched 43 suitors fail. I have watched my daughter's heart break 43 times. If you fail tomorrow, you will be the 44th. I understand. No, the Emperor said softly. I do not think you do. But perhaps you will? That night, Taiho could not sleep. He lay in his small room, staring at the alien ceiling, thinking about what he had done. He was not a hero. He was not a prince. He was just a man from a small planet who had seen something wrong and decided to do something about it. Maybe he would fail. Probably he would fail. But he remembered his grandfather's words, spoken to him when he was just a boy. The world is full of people who wait for someone else to act. Be the one who acts first. Tomorrow, he would act. In her own chambers, Princess Yuna also could not sleep. She had heard about the human's request. She had heard that her father had approved it. She did not understand. Why would this human risk his life for her? What could he possibly hope to gain? She closed her eyes and tried to sense his emotions from across the palace. But humans were strange. Their minds were different from other species. All she could feel was a distant warmth, like a small fire burning in the darkness. It was not much. But after years of cold, even a small fire felt like hope. The great hall was more crowded than it had ever been. Word had spread across the palace, across the planet, across the entire galaxy. A human was going to try. News drones from 1,000 worlds filled the air. Ambassadors who had left in boredom came rushing back. Nobles who had been laughing about the failed trials now pushed forward to get better seats. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Most of them expected to see a human die. Taiho stood at the back of the hall, waiting for his name to be called. He wore his simple Earth uniform, dark blue with silver buttons. He had no ceremonial robes, no royal jewelry, no ancient family sword. He was exactly what he appeared to be, a common man from a common world. Ambassador Park stood beside him. Her face was calm, but her hands were shaking. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "We can leave right now." "No one will blame you. I'll blame myself," Taiho said. "There are worse things than blame." "Yes, there are. Like giving up." The herald at the front of the hall raised his staff. The crowd fell silent. "Presenting the 44th suitor," the herald announced. His voice carried across the hall without effort. "Taiho of Earth, representing the human species." Taiho walked forward. The crowd parted for him, but not out of respect. They parted because they wanted to see clearly. They wanted to record every moment of his failure. The galaxy had been laughing at the Valorian princes for weeks. Now they would laugh at the humans too. Taiho ignored them. He kept his eyes on the throne. Princess Yuna sat there, just as she had sat for every trial. Her silver gown gleamed in the light of the floating crystals. Her face was a perfect mask of calm. But Taiho could see her hands gripping the arms of her throne. He could see the tension in her shoulders. She was afraid. Not of him. Of what was about to happen. He stopped at the traditional distance 20 steps from the throne. This was where the approach began. This was where every other suitor had started their walk toward her. "You may approach," the emperor said from his own throne. His voice was heavy with something that might have been sadness. Taiho took a step forward. At 15 steps, he felt the first touch of Yuna's power. It was like a cold wind blowing through his mind. He could feel her emotions pressing against him: fear, loneliness, a desperate hope she was trying to hide. At 12 steps, the pressure increased. Other suitors had started to stumble at this point. Some had turned back. Some had pressed forward only to collapse. Taiho kept walking. At 10 steps, the pain began. It was not physical pain, not exactly. It was something deeper. Yuna's loneliness became his loneliness. Her fear became his fear. 30 years of isolation, of being untouchable, of watching everyone she loved pull away, all of it poured into him. His vision blurred. His knees felt weak. But he kept walking. The crowd was silent now. No one was laughing. Even the news drones seemed to hover in stunned stillness. At 7 steps, Taiho's nose began to bleed. A thin line of red ran down his lip. He wiped it away without stopping. Yuna's mask cracked. Her eyes went wide. "Stop," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Please stop. You'll hurt yourself." Taiho did not stop. 5 steps, 4, the pain was incredible now. He could feel everything she felt, amplified beyond human limits. He could feel her shame at being rejected so many times. He could feel her guilt for hurting so many people who had tried to reach her. He could feel her certainty that she was broken, that she was a monster, that she deserved to be alone. 3 steps, 2. Taiho reached the base of the throne. He looked up at the princes. Blood was dripping from his nose now. His face was pale and covered in sweat. His hands were trembling, but he was still standing. "Why?" Yuna asked. Tears were forming in her silver eyes. "Why are you doing this?" Taiho smiled. It was a tired smile, full of pain, but it was real. "Because no one should have to sit there and be treated like a burden," he said. "Because everyone deserves someone who will try." He reached out his hand. The hall held its breath. Yuna stared at his hand. No one had touched her in years? The last person to try had been a servant who had accidentally brushed her arm. He had screamed for 3 hours, but this human was offering his hand freely. Knowing what it would cost him. Slowly, carefully, Yuna reached out. Their fingers touched. Taiho felt everything. Every emotion she had ever hidden, every tear she had never shed, every scream she had swallowed to maintain her dignity. It hit him like a wave crashing against rocks. His body shook. His vision went white, but he did not let go. He thought of his mother, who had raised 3 children alone after his father died. He thought of his sister, who had survived cancer through sheer stubbornness. He thought of his grandfather, who had lived through war and famine and still smiled every day. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the smartest or the fastest or the most advanced. But they knew how to endure. They knew how to hold on when everything was falling apart. Taiho held on. Seconds passed. Then a minute. Then two. Slowly, the pressure began to ease. Not because Yuna's power was fading, but because Taiho's mind was adapting. The human brain, scientists would later discover, had a unique ability. It could adjust to new stimuli faster than any other known species. What was overwhelming at first became manageable over time. Taiho opened his eyes. The world was blurry and strange, but he could see Yuna's face in front of him. She was crying openly now, silver tears running down her blue cheeks. "You're still here," she whispered. "I'm still here," he agreed. Behind them, the Emperor slowly rose from his throne. His face showed something no one had seen in years. Wonder. "The human," he said, and his voice filled the entire hall, has passed the first trial. For a moment, there was only silence, then someone began to clap. Then another person. Then another. Within seconds, the entire hall was applauding. Not mockingly, not sarcastically, but with genuine amazement. The news drones recorded everything, sending images to every corner of the galaxy. The human had done the impossible. He had touched the untouchable princes. And somewhere, in a small room in the far wing of the palace, Ambassador Park sat down heavily and began to cry with relief. The formal bonding trials lasted 7 days. They were designed centuries ago, when Valorian princes and princesses married for alliance and power. Every test had a purpose. Every challenge measured something important. Taiho faced them all. The first trial was endurance. He had to remain in the same room as Yuna for 12 hours without rest. Her emotional field pressed against him constantly, waves of feeling that never stopped. Other suitors had lasted minutes. The strongest had managed 2 hours before collapsing. Taiho lasted the full 12 hours. He did not sleep. He barely ate, but he stayed. The physicians who examined him afterward were confused. His brain scans showed patterns they had never seen before. Human neurons were rearranging themselves. In real time, building new pathways to handle the psychic input. It was like watching a river carve new channels through stone, except it happened in hours instead of centuries. "Remarkable," the chief physician said, studying the results. "His brain is not resisting the princess's field. It is learning to live with it." The second trial was communication. Valorian bonds were not just emotional, they were mental. Partners needed to understand each other on a level deeper than words. Taiho and Yuna were placed in a room together and told to spend the day in conversation. This was the trial Yuna had feared most. She had never truly talked to anyone, how could she? Every conversation became a flood of unwanted feelings. People could not focus on her words when they were drowning in her emotions, but Taiho was different. "Tell me about your childhood," he said, sitting across from her in the garden. The air smelled of alien flowers. 2 suns hung in the purple sky. "You don't want to know about my childhood?" Yuna said. "I asked, didn't I?" She looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she began to talk. She told him about growing up in the palace, surrounded by servants who were afraid to touch her. She told him about her mother, who had died when Yuna was young, and her father, who loved her but could never hold her. She told him about the endless lessons, the constant training, the desperate attempts to control a gift that could not be controlled. As she spoke, Taiho felt her emotions flowing into him. Sadness, anger, loneliness, but he did not flinch. He listened. And when she finished, he told her about his own life. He told her about Earth, a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy. He told her about his family, his stern father who had died in an accident, his kind mother who worked 2 jobs to feed her children, his younger sister who dreamed of being a doctor. He told her about joining the military because he wanted to protect people, and about becoming a security officer because he was good at staying calm when everything was falling apart. "You've had pain too," Yuna said quietly. "Everyone has pain," Taiho replied. "The question is what you do with it." "What do you do with yours?" Taiho thought for a moment. "I use it to understand other people. Pain teaches you things. It teaches you to recognize suffering when you see it. It teaches you to be kind." Yuna looked at him with something like wonder. "You're very strange, human. I keep hearing that." The third trial was physical compatibility. Valorian physicians needed to confirm that human and Valorian genetics could produce viable offspring. This involved many tests, many scans, many long hours in medical facilities. The results were promising. Human DNA was surprisingly adaptable. With proper treatment, conception was possible. The children would be hybrids, carrying traits from both species, but they would be healthy. They would live. Lord Hyok watched these developments from the shadows. Hyok was old nobility, descended from a family that had served the empire for 10,000 years. He had spent decades building power, making alliances, positioning himself for the day when the current emperor died and the succession crisis began. His plan was simple. If Princess Yuna failed to produce an heir, the crown would pass to the next branch of the royal family. Hyok had already arranged marriages with that branch. Within 2 generations, his bloodline would sit on the throne. But now a human was ruining everything. This cannot continue, Hyok said to his advisors. The human must fail. He is too strong, one advisor said. His mind adapts too quickly. Then we must break his mind before it can adapt. The fourth trial was trust. Taeho and Yuna were sent into the wilderness together to survive for 3 days with minimal supplies. They had to rely on each other. They had to work as partners. On the first night, they made camp beside a river of glowing water. The alien moon hung huge and orange above them. "Can I ask you something?" Yuna said. "Anything." "Do you regret volunteering?" Taeho considered the question. He had been in constant pain for days. His mind was exhausted from the endless psychic pressure. Every hour was a struggle. "No," he said. "Why not?" "Because I get to know you. That's worth the pain." Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then, for the first time in 30 years, she reached out and took someone's hand by choice. Not for a trial. Not because she was told to, just because she wanted to. They sat there together as the alien stars wheeled overhead, 2 people from opposite ends of the galaxy, holding hands in the darkness. On the morning of the 6th day, Lord Hyok's agents acted. They poisoned Taeho's food. Not with something that would kill him, that would be too obvious. Instead, they used a compound that inflamed human neurons, making them hypersensitive to psychic input. What had been painful before would now be agony. Taeho ate his breakfast without suspecting anything. An hour later, when Yuna entered the room for their daily session, he felt her presence like a knife in his skull. He screamed and fell to his knees. "Taeho!" Yuna rushed toward him, then stopped. "What's wrong? What happened?" The pain was blinding. He could barely think. But through the agony, something felt wrong. This was different. This was not natural. "Something!" he gasped. "Someone did this. Someone changed something." Yuna knelt beside him, careful not to touch. "What do you mean?" "I felt you yesterday. It hurt, but I could handle it." "This is different. This is wrong." Through their growing bond, Yuna could feel his certainty. He was not guessing. He knew someone had sabotaged the trials. She stood up, and for the first time in her life, the cold mask of the princess fell away completely. What replaced it was anger, pure, burning anger. "Guards!" she shouted. "Bring me the emperor." Now. The emperor summoned his most trusted officials. Physicians examined Taeho and found traces of the poison in his blood. Security officers reviewed records of everyone who had accessed the human's food. Within hours, they had a list of suspects. Lord Hyok's name was on that list. Taeho lay in the medical wing, fighting through the pain. The physicians had given him medicine to counteract the poison, but it would take days to fully leave his system. Until then, every moment near Yuna was torture. She visited him anyway. "You should stay away," Taeho said through gritted teeth. Even her presence in the doorway sent waves of agony through his skull. "It hurts." "I know," Yuna said. "I can feel it through our bond." "I feel everything you feel now. Then why are you here?" "Because you were there for me when it hurt." "I will be here for you." She sat in a chair across the room as far as possible while still being present. It was not much, but it was something. The investigation revealed the truth piece by piece. Lord Hyok had been planning this for years. He had placed agents throughout the palace. He had bribed officials, threatened servants, and built a network of loyalists who believed the empire would be better off under his family's control. The princess marrying a human was not part of his plan. When the emperor's guards came to arrest him, Hayok was calm. He had expected this. He had prepared for it. "You have no proof?" he said, standing in his chambers surrounded by guards. "You have suspicions and theories, nothing more." "We have the testimony of your agents," the captain of the guard said. "Agents who will say anything to save themselves." Hayok smiled. "This will not hold in court. I will be free within a week." The captain hesitated. He knew Hayok was right. Valorian law required solid evidence for conviction. Without it, even the emperor could not punish a noble of Hayok's standing. But Hayok had underestimated how much the situation had changed. News of the poisoning had spread across the galaxy. Billions of viewers who had watched Taiho's brave approach now watched in anger as the conspiracy was revealed. The human had become a symbol. A small, primitive species standing against the cruelty of the powerful. And the galaxy was choosing sides. Messages flooded in from 1,000 worlds. Demands for justice. Offers of support. The Galactic Council itself issued a statement expressing concern about the treatment of the human delegate. For the first time in centuries, the Valorian Empire was under outside pressure. The emperor sat alone in his chambers, considering his options. He was old and tired, and he had seen many crises in his long reign. But this one was different. This one involved his daughter's happiness. He had watched Yuna grow up isolated and alone. He had watched her suffer through trial after trial, rejected by everyone who came close. He had begun to accept that she would never find happiness, that his line would end with her. Then the human had appeared. The emperor had expected him to fail like all the others. Instead, he had succeeded beyond anyone's imagination. Not through strength or power, but through simple human stubbornness. He had refused to give up. And now someone was trying to destroy that. The emperor made his decision. "Bring Lord Hayok to the Great Hall," he ordered. In chains? The trial was broadcast across the galaxy. Lord Hayok stood before the throne in prisoner's restraints, his fine robes replaced with simple gray cloth. Around him stood the full court of the Valorian Empire. "Lord Hayok," the emperor said, his voice carrying through the vast hall, "you are charged with conspiracy against the crown, attempted murder of a diplomatic guest, and treason against the empire. How do you plead?" Hayok lifted his chin proudly. "Not guilty. These charges are—" I was not finished. The emperor's voice cut through his words like a blade. "You are also charged with causing emotional harm to the Princess of Valoria. For 30 years, my daughter has been treated as a burden. A curse, a problem to be solved. You and those like you have whispered behind her back, laughed at her pain, and prayed for her failure. This human showed more respect for her in 1 hour than you have shown in a lifetime." Hayok's confident expression flickered. "I do not need proof for a court," the emperor continued. "I am the emperor. My word is law. And my word is this: you are guilty. You are stripped of your titles, your lands, and your name. You will spend the rest of your days in the prison moons, contemplating the cost of betraying your princess." Guards seized Hayok and began dragging him away. For the first time, his mask of calm shattered. "You can't do this," he screamed. "I have rights. I have protection under the law." The emperor stood from his throne. For a moment he seemed taller, stronger, younger than his years. "You tried to destroy my daughter's one chance at happiness," he said quietly. "Be grateful I'm letting you live." Hayok was taken away, still screaming. In the medical wing, Taiho heard about the trial through the palace communication system. He smiled despite the pain still pounding in his head. "Your father doesn't play around," he said when Yuna came to visit. "He loves me," Yuna replied. "He just doesn't know how to show it most of the time." "Sounds like most fathers?" Yuna sat on the edge of his bed. They had discovered that brief contact was possible now, even with the poison still in his system. It hurt, but not unbearably. "The trials are almost over," she said. "One more test remains. The test of commitment. What does that involve? You have to answer one question in front of the entire court. Honestly, completely, without hesitation. What question? Yuna looked at him with silver eyes that held centuries of loneliness and a tiny spark of new hope. Do you truly wish to spend your life with me? Taiho reached out and took her hand. The pain flared, but he held on. Yes, he said simply. I do, Yuna smiled. It was a small smile, uncertain and fragile, but it was real. Then tomorrow, she said, we finish this. The final day of the trials should have been a celebration. Lord Hayok was gone? The conspiracy was broken. Taiho had proven himself worthy of the princess. All that remained was the formal question of commitment, and then the bonding would be complete, but Hayok had prepared one final move. The prison transport carrying him to the moon colonies never arrived. Halfway through the journey, Hayok's remaining loyalists attacked the ship. They killed the guards and freed their master. Now, Hayok had nothing left to lose. If I cannot rule the Empire, he told his followers, then the Empire will burn. He had spent decades placing agents in every corner of the palace. Some were servants. Some were guards. Some were officials who had grown tired of the current emperor's rule. They had been waiting for a signal that never came, until now, on the morning of the final trial, as the great hall filled with nobles and ambassadors. As news drones positioned themselves to record the historic moment, Hayok's agents acted. They seized control of the palace security systems. They activated ancient defense protocols that had been dormant for centuries. Combat drones awoke in forgotten armories. Energy barriers sealed the exits. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the red glow of emergency power. And in the great hall, chaos erupted. Nobles screamed and ran for doors that would not open. Guards drew weapons that were suddenly useless against their own defense systems. The Emperor shouted orders that no one could follow. In the confusion, Hayok's agents moved through the crowd. Their target was simple: kill the human and the princess. With them dead, the succession crisis would return. The Empire would tear itself apart fighting for the throne, and Hayok would rise from the ashes. Taeho saw them coming. He was still weak from the poison. His body ached and his mind throbbed with constant pain. But he had been a soldier before he was a diplomat. He knew how to read a battlefield. Get behind me, he said to Yuna. What are you? Behind me, now. She moved. She did not understand what was happening, but she trusted him. That trust had grown over the past week. Nurtured by honesty and pain and shared moments of quiet understanding, 3 agents approached from different directions. They wore the uniforms of palace servants, but their eyes were cold and their hands held hidden weapons. Taiho moved first. The first agent never saw the blow coming. Taiho's fist caught him in the throat, dropping him instantly. The second drew a knife and lunged, but Taiho had spent years training for exactly this kind of fight. He sidestepped, grabbed the knife arm, and twisted. The agent screamed as his elbow broke. The third agent was smarter. He kept his distance and raised a small device, some kind of energy weapon that the palace defenses would not block. He aimed at Yuna. Taiho did not think. He threw himself forward, covering the princess with his body. The weapon fired. Pain exploded through his shoulder as the energy bolt hit him, but he did not fall. He pushed through the agony, reached the third agent, and slammed him against the wall so hard that the stone cracked. The agent slumped to the ground. Unconscious, Taiho stood there, breathing hard, blood running from the wound in his shoulder. Around them, other fights were breaking out as loyal guards identified and attacked Hayok's agents. You're hurt, Yuna said. Her voice was strange, not afraid, but angry, protective. I've had worse, Taiho said. It was not entirely true. You could have died. So could you. More agents were coming. The palace was large, and Hayok had spent decades building his network. There were more enemies than loyal guards. Taiho looked around the hall. The exits were sealed. The Emperor was surrounded by protectors but pinned down. The news drones recorded everything, broadcasting the chaos to a watching galaxy. We need to reach the security control room, Yuna said. If we can reset the systems, we can stop this. Where is it? The lower levels, but we'll have to fight through them to get there. Taiho picked up a fallen guard's weapon. It was a staff-like device that crackled with energy. He did not know exactly how to use it, but he understood the basic principle. Point the dangerous end at enemies, then let's fight. They moved through the palace like ghosts. Yuna knew every corridor, every shortcut, every hidden passage. She had explored them all as a lonely child with no playmates. Now that knowledge became a weapon. Taiho cleared the path ahead of them. Agent after agent fell before him. Some were skilled fighters. Some were just desperate servants who had been promised power. It did not matter. Taiho was not fighting for power or glory. He was fighting for the woman behind him. The galaxy watched through the news drones that followed them. They saw a human wounded, poisoned, exhausted, refuse to stop. They saw him take down enemies twice his size. They saw him shield the princess with his body again and again. On 1,000 worlds, beings of every species watched in amazement. "Is this what humans are?" asked a child on a distant planet. "Yes," her mother said. "This is what humans are." They reached the security control room after what felt like hours. Hayok himself was waiting for them. He stood in the center of the room, surrounded by his most loyal fighters. His fine clothes were stained with blood that was not his own. His eyes burned with desperate fury. "The primitive and the cursed princess," he sneered. How poetic. The two freaks of the galaxy together at last. Taiho stepped forward. "Surrender? It's over. Over." Hayok laughed. "Look around you. I have 20 warriors. You have a broken body and a princess who can't touch anyone without causing pain. She can touch me. And what does that matter?" Taiho smiled. It was a dangerous smile, the smile of a man who had nothing left to lose. "It means I'm not alone." He attacked. The fight was brutal and bloody. Hayok's warriors were trained killers. Taiho was a single human with a wounded shoulder and a body full of poison, but Taiho had something they did not have. He had Yuna. She fought beside him, using her power in ways she had never tried before. Instead of projecting her emotions accidentally, she focused them deliberately. Fear struck the enemies like a physical force. Despair made them hesitate. Rage made them sloppy, and through it all, Taiho kept moving. One by one, the warriors fell. Some fled, some surrendered. And finally, only Hayok remained. He stood with his back to the control panel. A knife in his hand. "You're nothing," he spat at Taiho. "A primitive from a primitive world." Taiho walked toward him slowly. "Maybe," he said. "But I'm the primitive who's going to marry your princess." He caught Hayok's knife hand and broke it in 2 places. Then he threw the noble lord to the ground and stood over him. "And if you ever threaten her again," Taiho said, "I'll break more than your hand." Yuna stepped past him and reset the security systems. Throughout the palace, the energy barriers fell. The combat drones shut down. The loyal guards overwhelmed the remaining agents. The crisis was over. In the Great Hall, the Emperor watched the feed from the security room. He saw the human standing over the defeated lord. He saw his daughter working calmly at the controls, and he smiled. "So that's what humans are," he said quietly. "Now I understand." The Valorian Empire changed slowly, as ancient things always change. Lord Hayok was tried again, properly this time, and sentenced to life imprisonment on the most distant moon colony. His network of agents was dismantled piece by piece. New security protocols were established. The old ways of conspiracy and shadow politics began to fade. And Taiho healed. The poison left his system over the course of weeks. His shoulder wound became a scar, one of many he had collected over his life. The constant pain of being near Yuna faded as his brain finished adapting to her power. Now, when she touched him, he felt only warmth. The wedding was scheduled for the first day of the Valorian New Year, a time of hope and renewal. It would take place aboard the Imperial flagship, the largest vessel in the Valorian fleet, orbiting the home star. Representatives from every major civilization were invited. Even species that had laughed at the trials now sent their ambassadors. Everyone wanted to witness history. Taiho stood in his dressing room, staring at himself in the mirror. He wore a traditional Korean hanbok, deep blue with silver embroidery that matched Valorian royal colors. His mother had sent it from Earth, along with a handwritten letter that had made him cry. Ambassador Park stood behind him, adjusting his collar. "You clean up well?" she said. "Who would have thought?" "Not me," Taiho admitted. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified." Park smiled. "Good, that means you understand how important this is." There was a knock at the door. Dr. Minho poked his head in. "They're ready for you?" he said. The ceremony chamber was the largest room on the flagship. Transparent walls looked out on the endless stars. 1,000 guests sat in floating chairs arranged in concentric circles around the central platform. Taiho walked down the aisle alone, as human tradition demanded. Every eye followed him. Every camera recorded his steps. The former security officer from a small blue planet, walking to marry the princess of an ancient empire. Yuna waited for him at the platform. She wore silver and white, a gown that flowed like liquid starlight. Her silver hair was arranged in an elaborate style that had taken hours to complete. She looked like something from a fairy tale, a princess from the edge of the universe. But when she saw Taiho, she smiled. Not the cold, perfect smile she showed to courts and cameras. A real smile, wide and bright and full of joy. The emperor stood between them, serving as the ceremonial officiant. He looked healthier than he had in years. Hope, it seemed, was good medicine. "We are gathered here," he began, his voice carrying through the vast chamber, "to witness a union unlike any in the history of the galaxy. 2 species, 2 worlds, 2 hearts joined together not by politics or power, but by choice." He looked at Taiho. "1 year ago you were a stranger, a human from a world we barely knew existed. You had no wealth, no power, no ancient bloodline. By every measure the galaxy uses to judge worth, you were nothing." Taiho said nothing. He knew the emperor was not finished. "But you taught us something important," the emperor continued. "Worth is not measured by age of civilization or strength of arm. It is measured by the heart that refuses to yield, by the soul that sees suffering and chooses to act, by the love that endures when all hope seems lost." He turned to Yuna. "My daughter, you have waited 30 years for someone who could stand beside you. Someone who would see past the curse, past the power, past the crown, and see you. Today you no longer have to wait." Yuna's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Do you, Princess Yuna of Valoria, take this human as your bonded partner? To share his joys and sorrows, his triumphs and failures, his life and his world?" "I do," Yuna said. Her voice was steady and strong. "And do you, Taiho of Earth, take this princess as your bonded partner? To stand beside her through all challenges, to protect her heart as fiercely as you protect her body, to be her home among the stars?" Taiho looked at Yuna. He remembered the first time he saw her, sitting alone on that throne while the galaxy laughed. He remembered thinking that someone should do something. He had never imagined that someone would be him. "I do," he said. The emperor raised his hands. "Then, by the authority vested in me as ruler of the Valorian Empire, I declare you bonded partners. From this day forward, you are 1 heart, 1 purpose, 1 future." Taiho reached out and took Yuna's hand. No pain came, only warmth. Her emotional field washed over the assembled crowd, but for the first time, it did not carry loneliness or fear. It carried something new, joy, pure, boundless, overwhelming joy. The crowd did not cry out or flee. They did not collapse under the weight of emotion. Instead, they felt what the princess felt. They shared her happiness, and many of them began to cry. Not from pain, from wonder. Taiho pulled Yuna close and kissed her. It was their first kiss, saved for this moment. Through their bond, he felt her love flowing into him like sunlight. Through their bond, she felt his stubbornness, his determination, his unwavering commitment. They were home. The wedding celebration lasted for 3 days. There was music from 100 worlds, food from 1,000 cultures. Dancing that went on until the stars themselves seemed to spin. Earth sent a special delegation, Taiho's mother, his sister, his old friends from the military. They stood among alien nobles and ancient aristocrats, looking small and strange and wonderful. "My son," his mother said, holding Taiho's hands, "I always knew you would do something amazing. I just never imagined this." "Neither did I," Taiho admitted. His sister hugged him tight. "Don't forget about us small people when you're busy being a space prince." "I'm not a prince," Taiho said. "You married a princess? That makes you a prince." "I checked." Taiho laughed. Some things never changed, no matter how far from home you traveled. 2 years later, Yuna gave birth to their first child, a daughter. She had her mother's silver hair and her father's warm brown eyes. Scientists across the galaxy studied her with wonder. She was the first of her kind, a hybrid of human and Valorian, carrying the best of both species. Her name was Hana. It meant one in Korean and flower in the old Valorian tongue. A bridge between worlds. The genetic plague that threatened the Valorian people was not cured overnight. But Hana's birth proved that a cure was possible. Human-Valorian hybrids were compatible with both species. Within a generation, the empire would be reborn. On the day of Hana's first birthday, the emperor made a speech that was broadcast across the galaxy. 30 years ago, he said, my daughter was called cursed. Today she is called blessed. 30 years ago, humanity was unknown. Today, they are honored. One man changed everything. One man who refused to give up. One man who saw a princess where others saw a burden and love where others saw only pain. He smiled at Taiho, who stood beside Yuna with their daughter in his arms. When the galaxy laughed, humanity stood up. And the galaxy will never forget. In classrooms throughout the Concord, children of every species learned a new lesson. They learned about the princess who was called cursed. They learned about the human who volunteered when no one else would. They learned about the power of stubborn love. And when they looked up at the stars, they knew that somewhere out there, a security officer from a small blue planet was holding hands with an ancient princess. Still holding on. Never letting go.